How do you stay positive and lead with clarity when the world feels increasingly unpredictable? In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Julie Robinson, Chief Executive of the Independent Schools Council, to explore what it really takes to lead through complexity, build confidence in uncertain times, and keep a sense of purpose at the heart of your leadership. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast with me, Juliet Corbett. I'm a trusted advisor, executive coach and strategist, working with accomplished leaders who are navigating complex challenges, the kind that can feel like a tangled ball of string, confusing, frustrating, and hard to unpick. In this new series, I bring you real-world conversations with principals, heads and CEOs of independent and international schools. Together, we explore problem-solving in uncertainty, staying strategic amidst the daily bustle of leadership, and building high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by a friend of the Independent School Podcast, Julie Robinson. She joined me for an interview back in 2022, and I'm delighted that she's back today to give us a bit of an update. Julie is the Chief Executive of the Independent Schools Council. That's the UK's umbrella body for associations representing heads, governors and bursars in independent schools. Julie began her career as a teacher and as a head in Sussex prep schools before moving into national association roles. Since joining ISC as their CEO in 2015, she's become a widely recognised ambassador for independent education, and you'll probably have heard her appearing regularly in the national media. She's both been rebutting some untruths around the sector and explaining and advocating for the value of independent schools and of parental choice. Julie also serves as a governor for both an academy and an all-through independent school in London. And she's a really strong advocate for collaboration across all different kinds of schools. In our conversation today, we talk about what it means to lead with positivity, especially when the environment around you is complex, fast-moving, and really quite unpredictable. We talk about making sense of uncertainty and how leaders can make space to think clearly, even when their diaries are notoriously full. We also explore the value of coaching and the importance of self-management when you're trying to sustain clarity, energy, and resilience for the long term. It's a really thoughtful, generous conversation, and I'm delighted that she's been able to join us back on the podcast. So settle back and enjoy. Hello, Julie, and welcome to the Independent School Podcast. It is fabulous to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you for having me back again. It's very exciting.
It is. We have all sorts to talk about. We last spoke 2022. Quite a lot has changed. But first of all, I'd like to rewind us back a little bit further. I'd love to hear a little bit about the passion for education that you've got to have deep down. The reason you come to work every day, even when it's hard, when it's draining, it can be exhausting sometimes. What gives you that positivity, that passion for what it is you're doing?
Oh, it's really easy in education. Very, very easy. So I was originally a teacher, and it was all about the children, seeing them succeed, supporting and encouraging them. And then as a head, it was that, but for the staff as well. And now running ISC, I feel like I'm an ambassador for all of that, all of the independent schools, those whole communities. And I feel like it's my duty to defend and promote them, and it's for the children. And I connect back into that really directly because I'm a governor at an independent school and a state school. So I still get to see the children, and I still get to see the amazing teachers and school leaders. And that absolutely gives me the energy and the motivation to go out there every day and keep going.
Do you actually do anything to bring those people to mind, or does it happen automatically? You don't need to actually consciously bring them to mind. It's deep inside you.
Yeah, I do, because I've been to so many conferences now where when I was a head, I'd go to conferences and I think, yeah, but what about the children? So I try to make sure there are pictures of children reminding us when I'm speaking. And when I'm doing interviews, the thing I can bring to policy discussion that not everyone can bring is the experience that I was a teacher and I was a head and I know what it's like in these schools. So that naturally leads me into anecdote. And I do find that politicians and journalists are interested in the human element. So bringing it back to what's real for me is, yes, very easy. And hopefully I think of a good anecdote to back up a point I'm making, just to keep it real. Yeah, so it's easy.
That is the storytelling, isn't it? As humans, we're kind of drawn to tell and to listen to stories and to feel the emotion that comes alongside that, as well as the facts and figures and the rational, logical argument that you might be making.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that when you started to become a teacher and you made that decision you were going to go into teaching, you didn't envisage where you are now. You probably didn't know this existed, I would imagine.
No, even when I started this job, I didn't really know what this job was exactly. And it's changed because I've done it for 10 years now. I went into teaching because I loved that community. It felt a real privilege to carry on exploring literature, which was my degree, and be around people. And I just think that the energy in school life is, I don't think you can beat it. Being surrounded by young people who've got their whole lives ahead of them and attempting to be that positive influence to help them along. That's just so energizing. Absolutely love that. And so right from the beginning, when I went to interviews and in teacher training, I felt that and held on to that. And that's why even now I go back and do school prize givings and that sort of thing, just get a little bit of that back again, that feeling of being in the classroom.
Yeah. A lot of leaders miss it when they move up into headship or CEO roles, or as you have into the world of associations. It's getting that fix, if you like, of that positivity and that
there are echoes
joy.
of it. There are parallels, if that's the kind of person you are, and I am. So my love of being in the classroom then became assemblies, whole school assemblies, loved that. Really, really liked running assemblies. And then if you talk to some of my staff here, I've got a small team at ISC. Sometimes they say, oh, it's Friday afternoon. It's like we're doing storytelling on the carpet now. So I think it's a way of being, and you can bring it, you can go from teaching into coaching. Doesn't matter what age someone is, you can still support and encourage them. So I do feel that continues.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. There's quite a few times when I'm coaching and talking to senior leaders, really accomplished leaders, and one way I can help them to see something differently might be to say, well, if we were dealing with children, we'd be talking about this. And, we might be talking about the easy growth mindset, or sense of responsibility, or whatever it might be, or the kind of the motivation kind of success cycle. And then I say, well, it's exactly the same. That's not a child thing. That's a human thing. How does that map on to how you're leading your team as opposed to how you're leading your classroom? And there's normally something new that they can see, having seen that they can apply everything they learn can be applied to human nature, full stop, not just children.
Yeah, and age is not really the point. I mean, I used to get quite frustrated if we had a visiting speaker at school. So this was prep schools up to age 13. And if I felt they were being patronizing to the children, children are young adults, aren't they? And sometimes adults are just grown-up children, and we're just complex people. And sometimes people like a simple explanation. You don't have to try to make it big and complex. The world is already complex enough. So I think, to stay close to what does work for you. And if you're comfortable in the classroom, absolutely apply that across the rest of your life. Why not, if it works? It's human interaction, isn't it?
Yeah. You mentioned complexity. Now, there'll be some people listening who are not embedded as you and I are in the to's and fro's of government policy in the UK and all the rest of it. We've had over the last however many years. You are operating in a really complex environment in terms of the way that the sector has been buffeted by unexpected and unanticipated changes. Can you give us, this is a really challenging question, can you give us a couple of minutes, like overview of what you think has shifted in the last few years? Maybe assuming that people are listening from overseas and maybe don't have all of the detail, just to put some context around the rest of our conversation today.
Yeah, I think everyone will recognise there has been political change. But what I've noticed is economic uncertainty. You know, we came out of COVID thinking, wow, we got through that, kind of expecting things to go back to this idea we had about what was normal before COVID, and that never happened. I think there's some sort of latent trauma in all of us, and that has affected politics, society, mental health, well-being, expectations, the work from home, working in the office or the in school environment. I think that's the same across the world. And then, yeah, in the UK, we've had a change of government. And the two things that really stand out to me over the last couple of years, this might be my age, so do sense check me on this, is a sense of uncertainty about what's coming next. So we used to sort of feel we knew what the world looked like, but so much is changing so quickly. So the speed of change, partly that's AI, which is both exciting and a little bit terrifying all at the same time. But yeah, politics in this country and in others is shifting. It's not as simple as assuming a left and a right now. So in England, I used to go to 2 or 3 political party conferences. There are now 4. Trying to predict where the political power is going to be, even in a year's time, and who's going to be in charge and what they're going to bring to it. It's really hard. So unpredictability we are living with, and the effect on independent schooling is, of course, education, highly politicised in this country. And independent schools have had to deal with this sudden shock of the imposition of 20% VAT on parents' school fees. And it's very rare across the world to see education taxed in this way. And my organisation supported a judicial review. So this time last year, we were going to court about that policy. So that has been huge upheaval, and it has meant independent schools, every single independent school has had to review its financial situation, its strategic planning, and it's had to take on board VAT on school fees. That has been huge for us over the last couple of years. It's really dominated our thinking. And yet underneath that, and I think this is the same worldwide, we're all looking to how do we support the nation's children towards a positive and optimistic future, where we are feeling financial pressures, then green issues, which have become a priority, they're getting pushed back down the priority list a little bit again. So there is every excuse, if you like, to be the anxious generation, and we are trying to hang in there and make sense of this world.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, isn't it? It's we talked about storytelling, but we're sense makers as humans. We want to have some predictability, to be able to put the trends together and see a pattern, and therefore be able to predict with some level of certainty what's going to happen next. I don't know whether that's higher or lower than it used to be. There have definitely been times in our parents' generation or grandparents' generation where there was enormous amounts of uncertainty. You can think of going through 2 world wars in Europe. That's enormous uncertainty. I don't think it matters that we try to outdo previous generations in how much uncertainty we're dealing with. What does matter is to acknowledge that as humans, we're not brilliant at uncertainty, and it makes us quite uncomfortable, and quite, especially as leaders, if we have any mindsets hidden behind the scenes of I should know the answers, I should know how to lead my organisation. And actually you don't always know, because you can't know what's coming next. It's that sense of how do we lead through uncertainty given that it's there, lead through complexity given that it's there, that I find really interesting. You've mentioned positivity a couple of times. I actually think this is one of the keys, is that the sense that we don't know all the answers. We can't know all the answers. However much data and big brains we get in a room together, we're not going to be able to figure it out. So let's figure out what are our next couple of steps that make sense right now. And let's feel really positive and hopeful, and therefore be open to learn what worked, what didn't. But that positivity is really critical, isn't it, I think?
Yes, positivity to drive forward and to stick with it. I think persistence really, really important. I'd say probably it's more important than any skill or knowledge. It's just sort of application to the issues in hand. And I think without a sense of positivity or mission, you could just run out of steam. Yes, everything is so complex. And you're right. I think we like to feel the sense of certainty, which gives us a sense of security, although we probably know that we're kidding ourselves because we don't have that level of control over the world that we might feel we'd like to have. So we are trying to work it out as we go along. And yes, that's very interesting what you say, just looking to the next thing. So I think for us, it was a sense of, okay, there's a lot going on here. And perhaps this is a daily issue. What's really important? What are the top things right now we really ought to deal with? And they're not necessarily the easy things to get over with, and they're not necessarily straightforward. But I think reviewing our priorities is very important. And then to think, what can we do? What's possible? And I'm a big believer in getting together and talking to people who are better than me at detail and thinking things through and coming together around an issue or a problem, working out a strategy, but then being open-minded. And I suppose that's being open to uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen next. And I think perhaps there's a human tendency to close that down and to pigeonhole things. We've certainly seen that with independent schools in the UK being treated as a stereotype. It's quite an easy thing to do if you don't know one yourself. So remaining open-minded to the diversity of life, which of course is wonderful, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. So saying to yourself, what's important today? What do I really need to focus on? And what can I do about it?
Yeah. I love that. Well, firstly, you and I clearly think quite similarly on a lot of these things. It's always nice to talk to someone who has a similar worldview. We know the importance of having conversations with people with a different worldview as well. But what you've just articulated actually is a core part of what I think is really important with complexity and uncertainty. So you've described the ability to take stock. I often call this slowing down, slow down to speed up. So with your team taking stock of, okay, let's pause for a moment. Let's analyze what's important, not just the noisiest things or the urgent things. What's really important, even if it takes courage to address those things. They're not the easy things always. It's then about having the ability to work out what's the strategic way to focus on these. What's the message you want to get through? Who's going to help us? What are the paths we want to pursue in terms of what might work to get this message across or to get this project off the ground or this challenge solved? And then I think it's something about courage as well. It's taking the courageous actions. Like, we know life is so fast these days. Slowing down is really, really hard. You can't do everything on your to-do list. Like, it's impossible. You will never do everything on your to-do list. So pick the things that are courageous, that are going to actually move the needle substantially, not necessarily the ones that feel the easiest.
Absolutely. I think in order to make a difference, then we do need to confront the difficult things. And I think it's quite easy for any of us in any field of work to get very busy, to show how busy we are. I do a thing every weekend where I look at the week ahead, because every day is an adventure, Juliet. There is so much going on, and then diaries change as well. So I try to sort of look at the week ahead, and I send this to my chairman, and my focus is on not what I'm doing, but why I'm meeting that person, what the value is, how it feeds back to that sort of the strategic aims you're talking about. And that's really, I think, to sense check that I'm not just getting busy. But at the same time, there are things in that week on purpose, which are things I want to do. Now, they might be evening events. I don't have to go to them, but you never know who you're going to meet and what conversation you might or might not have. And I enjoy that aspect. So it's not about efficiency. It's not 100% about efficiency. It's about, I suppose, effectiveness,
Yes.
going in the right direction. And I quite often find that sort of random meetings and work I've done, invisible work I've done quietly on my own, those are the things that pay off later, not just the sort of performative things where people can see you gave a talk somewhere. So all of that makes it quite hard to know what is important. But I love your idea about slowing down, because I have to travel around, do lots of conferences, and it's pretty wearing. But I'm lucky I've got Jess, my EA, who does the travel logistics, which I really don't like. So, you know, she sets it all up. And it's when I'm traveling between things, actually, I do quite a lot of thinking and make notes in my notebook. And because it's quiet time, I get thinking done.
That's really important, to find that rhythm that allows you to get the thinking time. And people know you're traveling, so you might be responding to the occasional email during that, but there's not an expectation that you're immediately kind of accessible and responsive. It's really interesting that the sense checking that you just described of figuring out what is important. It's really easy to say focus on what's important, not what's urgent. But actually, then when you get down to the reality of how do I figure that out, I love that what you've described there's some strategic element to that, of which meetings am I having, why am I having those meetings? You know, so you go into each conversation with a sense of what the outcome is, or the purpose is, or what you want to understand better from that conversation with that person or that meeting. But then there's also the chance element of going to an evening thing, and as long as you're managing your energy budget and you're not exhausting yourself, then there's that serendipity of, I happened to bump into so and so, and there's a sense of intuition of, is this the right thing for me to be doing right now? So there's strategic cognitive processing and there's intuition at play here, I think.
Yes, and I've also become aware over time that I may well have my agenda. I might be really clear about what I want out of a conversation, but I have to swallow that slightly and see what the other person's agenda is.
Yes.
Because there have been many, many times, and I've learned this the hard way, where I've gone in with some great data that my team have come up with that proves a point beautifully. But if the person I'm talking to is not receptive, I'm not going to get that across. And the more experience I have, the more I would like to be expert in asking questions to make the other person think and say back to me what I would like to be saying to them, if that makes sense. So just going in expecting to sort of perform your piece and then everyone will understand and we'll all live happily ever after, sadly hasn't happened, at least not recently.
No.
But to respectfully just be there with your message, demonstrating authentically you might have something useful for this other person, can often be the main point of a meeting sometimes. I used to expect to get through a lot of material and to be able to deliver messages, but I've had to learn that other people around the table need to be engaged, they need to be listening. I'm sure they're bombarded with information as well.
And if they could have just read the report that you're about to verbally give, they'd have read the report and changed their mind, but they haven't. So the one-to-one human interaction has a different purpose. I mean, every meeting is different, but I often think the default is that we go into a conversation wanting to understand a little bit more about how the other person sees the world, because that means that the next conversation, because normally these aren't one-shot games, these are kind of infinite game relationships that develop. So the more you can get to understand how they see the world and hope that they will see how you see the world, regardless of the intention they've come into the meeting with, then you're slowly moving towards a point where you're actually getting the message across. And that takes patience, it takes listening skills, you mentioned coaching earlier and asking questions, you mentioned now, it takes the ability to ask a question and not always be the one that has to have all the answers at the ready. And normally it means being ready to go with the flow of the meeting and what feels right at the moment, rather than having your 15 prepared bullet points that you're going to go through regardless of the response.
Yes, and I'm representing independent education, and there are plenty of people who are fundamentally opposed to private education as they would see it. So for me, sometimes the first chunk of a meeting is just about building rapport, demonstrating understanding, because sometimes people are expecting an argument, or sometimes they just need to tell you what they think first, and that can take a long time. But then, you know how people talk about the attention economy, particularly sort of online, being able to attend to them and maintain their attention long enough to then get a little bit of the message through. I think that's so skillful, and it's very much a personal skill, isn't it? It's very much an in-person being in the room with someone. It's very difficult to do that on a screen. I think it is possible.
It is.
But it's tougher.
It is tougher, especially if it's the first time you're doing it, or the only time you're doing it is on a screen. I think if it's a follow-up conversation, it's easier. But in terms of establishing rapport, establishing a relationship, it can be harder. What I find interesting around this is it's really hard to like write a leadership book that tells people how to do this. There's something about the way you've just got to practice it and feel it for yourself. And I wonder whether that's where the growth of kind of executive coaching, I know a lot of heads now, it's kind of expected that there will be an opportunity for them to have a coach. I wonder what you feel about leadership development actually through coaching to enable someone to find their way of doing what you're describing, because we can't just read books and listen to podcasts and expect to get this stuff. It's quite complicated.
Well, it's developed hugely across my career. So I was a head a very long time ago. I think I've been out of headship about 15 years now. And at that time, there wasn't an awful lot. I mean, the word coaching was used. But when I was working for IAPS in courses and training, coaching was becoming more of a theme. And now I like to think, as you said, there's an expectation that leaders will have a coach. I mean, unfortunately, you know, in my career, and I'm going back some years, I've come across people who would say, if you think you need a coach, then does that mean you can't do this job?
Yeah, it's
you know, you're lacking something. And actually, no, it means you've got the self-awareness to know you don't know everything, and you are aiming for optimum performance. It's a great sign. And I'm a huge fan where head teachers are appointed, that the school governors or proprietors include in the package coaching into the job, because it's a tough job. And I think everyone can benefit so much by having that reflective time. And I have been lucky for the last 8 years or so to be able to have monthly coaching sessions, which I absolutely love and sort of rely on as a touch point for reflection, catching up, a bit of slower time. I think it's wonderful. There's so much of it now. It's a very, very positive development for the support of leaders and school leaders.
I think the evolution, a lot of people talk about coaching now in terms of the leadership skill as well. So we talk about being a leader who has the coaching skills to then coach their team, which is brilliant. And then there's another flavour of that, which is being an executive coach, which is an external person, very kind of confidential one-to-one conversation. There's obviously group coaching versions of that you can do too. And I think it's evolving even more than that. I think the next stage is people who can combine pure coaching, executive coaching, with really deep knowledge of the sector. So it becomes more of a thinking partner, trusted advisor style relationship. So I think that there's an evolution of understanding of the impacts that coaching can have across different parts of leadership.
When I started my career, it was just referred to as communication skills that you either had or didn't have. And now there are so many strategies available to those people who engage in exactly that process. And I think that is important, because there are so many pressures, and particularly in schools. You know, if you think of the many, many issues that a teacher and a school leader has to deal with, it's very, very demanding. I used to say sort of 360-degree skill set is expected. So you can only deliver that in a school community if you work well in a team and you understand your strengths and where someone else has a strength that complements yours. And it all comes back to, as you were saying earlier on, human interaction and effectively supporting and communicating.
Yeah.
And I think being
absolutely.
a role model as well, back to that optimism for the young people, it would be awful if schools were not positive communities, because there are so many negatives to be consumed in the media. We need to help direct young people towards managing their own boundaries and finding a positive bias somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And any leadership role, especially when you get to the top of an organization, so head, CEO, etc., can be really lonely. So to have someone that's there to boost that positivity, to give that sense of optimism that you've got strategies, you've got ideas, you've got ways to move forwards, I think it's really important. And then that flows through a community, doesn't it? And we all know as well that a community doesn't have to be full of positive people, but if there are enough of them, that's the momentum, that's the direction it takes. And even if you've got a few people who either temporarily or perhaps permanently have a slightly more negative viewpoint, that's okay. Every community has different people in it, different parts of life represented, but it's the kind of majority sense of optimism and hope and positivity in a school community that I think can make the real difference.
I think what we're aspiring for is a coaching culture. And I think that also gives us all a vocabulary to describe the negative and the positive, and yes, to observe and accept all of those things are part of life. And then lean into the positive and remember to celebrate those positives as well. Creating a narrative where there is a sense of natural justice and positivity, which is what I used to try to do in my school assemblies.
And I'm sure
you do it in staff meetings, actually.
You used to do it in the classroom, then in school assemblies, now in staff meetings, and also on, Radio 4's Today programme. You're taking that same sense of you and what's important to you, even if you don't know it, you're taking it into every interaction and evolution of that career. Julie, our time is coming to an end today. If there was one thing that you'd really like those people listening to take away that helps them to reflect on their own leadership, what's the core message you'd like people to take away?
Oh, well, I think the most important thing to come back to is self-management. And in terms of being positive, you were talking about, being positive with yourself. So the older I've got, the more I've had to prioritize things that might seem a little bit boring, but they're so important, like getting enough sleep. Get that in the diary. So I think managing yourself and accepting you can't do everything. I think our expectations of ourselves are so high, and it's great to have high aims and expectations, but just to be realistic and kind to yourself in terms of, so let's say the thing to take away is remember to enjoy the enjoyables in life. Don't forget that along the way through the struggles.
I love that. So we've got themes running through our conversation around self-management and self-awareness and an ability to manage the simple things. It's amazing. And you mentioned sleep. It's amazing how many people I talk to, really accomplished leaders, who are still talking about how to manage an inbox and their email and diary management and things like that. The simple things allow us to have that self-management, that reserves of resilience, so that we can be persistent, so that we can have that positivity, that hope, acknowledging that there's a dark side to every strength. And at the same time, we could all move forward when we acknowledge that we've got all these strengths together as a team. I love that. We're going to finish with hope.
Feed the positive energy.
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Julie. It's been wonderful to have you here with us on the Independent School Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Juliet.
Thank you for listening to the Independent School Podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, I invite you to join my email list and hear more of my fresh thinking on leading strategically through complexity and uncertainty. Visit www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign up. Remember, the biggest challenges you face are rarely solved by working harder. They're solved by thinking differently, with the right trusted advisor in your corner. While I work with leaders across many sectors, my heart and more than 2 decades of experience remain deeply rooted in education. If you're ready to turn complexity into progress, sharpen your focus, and lead a happier, higher performing team, I'd love to start a conversation about how we could work together. Just reach out anytime. And don't forget, the clearest insights often appear when you gift yourself a moment to slow down and let your best thinking surface.